Hey guys, come on in. Today I'm playing some deep stack, no limit Texas Hold'em at Jacksonville, Florida's very own a best bet. And I want to get straight into it today. I am in the hijack and look down at pocket deuces. I open to $15, to which my opponent directly to my left, he three bets to $45. And it ultimately folds back around to me. I stick in the call. We're going sat mining. And we get exactly what we're hoping for with a set of ducks on the flop. My mind switches to how do I get all my money in on the very first hand? We're going big. We're going for a $90 bet out of position into $96. My opponent doesn't think too long about it, makes the call. Love to see it. What does that tell us about his range? Well, pretty much over pairs, maybe top pair, maybe a flush draw. The action tracker is a little bit behind. It is the Queen of Spades on the turn. I go for a 2/3 pot size bet here of 125. And my opponent doesn't think too long. He makes the call. So kind of can rule out that he has a set of queens here. He'd have to be slow playing. I imagine we just get it all in right there. The river is the 7 of diamonds. So I'm pretty damn confident that I'm good here. I'm going for it all. I stick in my remaining $140, which definitely is not a welcome sight for my opponent. He's a little bit uneasy here. I know I'm ahead. I know I'm winning this pot. He sticks in the call, and we show him the bad news. We get max value, and, I think when you take this line out of position, it's typically very strong, or it's a bluff. So this bet line to a competent player, who my opponent is a competent player, it can look bluffy. And if your opponent thinks that you're capable of bluffing, you're going to get paid sometimes. Here we are an hour later. My opponent to the right of me in the cutoff opens to $15. I'm on the button and look down at pocket aces. I 3-bet that to $35. It's a smaller size. I want to induce action, especially with only 2 people left to act behind me. We get a single caller and go to a flop. 3, 7, 9, 2 spades. Don't mind this flop at all. I'm going to continue for $40 into a pot of 75. Again, just inducing, trying to keep the draws and the top pairs in. Considering my 3-bet kind of on the smaller side, it's very possible he's got a suited gapper, suited connector, draw heavy hand. The turn is the 10 of diamonds, so not in love with that. My opponent checks over to me, and I think about it for a second. End up betting $80 into $154 pot, so about 50%. I could have sized up here, maybe go to 90, 95, keep it below 100. Probably would accomplish the same thing. I like to check my cards here, just making sure I got the ace of spades, ace of diamonds, making flush draws a little less likely from him. My opponent makes the call, and we go to a river, which is the 2 of hearts. Pretty inconsequential. My opponent thinks for a moment or two and ultimately donks into me for $60. I'm just going to call that insta. I'm confident and I have the best hand at that point. Doubt I left any value on the table, especially with the missed draws out there, top pair changing on the turn, so I'm satisfied with the play here. The very next deal, we have an open to $15 from the +1 position. I'm in the cutoff with Queen Jack suited, make the call. Button calls, big blind calls. I like my hand multi-way, especially when we flop 2 pair. But we got a very wet connected board here. It checks over to me, and I go for a $35 bet into 75. I would like to see a bigger bet from me in this particular spot. I'd like a 2/3 pot size bet, but we get 2 callers. Turn is a 3 of hearts. Check over to me. I bet $85 into 180, so about 50%. I think this turn bet is just too small here, especially with all the draws, but it ultimately gets the job done. A smaller bet like that, if one of my opponents calls and the other is kind of on the fence, it just gives better odds for them to call as well. So I guess you could say a leak could have been my bet sizing here, but it worked out. I'm in the hijack. The under the gun opens to $10. I call The cutoff makes it $35. With king 8 suited here, probably just a fold to a 3-bet. The under the gun makes the call, and a card gets exposed. The exposed card was indeed one of my outs. I believe it was the 9 of diamonds. I see it after I had already made the call, which is part of the game sometimes. But we flop a flush draw, and the board is connected enough that my 8 and king are in there. So it goes check, check over to the 3-bet raiser, who bets $75. Of course, we have equity on the flop plus the backdoor draws. So $75 is the most I would call here. I imagine the opponent wanted to keep draws in, so good bet from them. The turn is an 8, so more equity. I really can't go anywhere at this point. It does go check, check, and our aggressor ends up checking. So a free card, not bad, but it ends up getting me into more trouble when the ace of clubs comes on the river. It gets checked to me, and I want to take down this pot, so I go for a bet of 150. I recognize this board is very connected. You know, an ace completes a straight, the 8 completes a straight. I had to go for it here. Our opponent does make the call. He really didn't play like he had aces at all, so I was really trying to just get a queen to fold. I'm satisfied with the river bet here. It's big enough to accomplish what I was hoping to accomplish, and small enough not to really affect my mentality going forward. There's a button straddle, and I am basically in middle position here. Look down at pocket fives, which I decide to open to $15. After some thought, my opponent to the left decides to 3-bet to $32. Very small 3-bet sizing here, which does get everybody to fold over to the button, who bumps it up to $75. Again, smaller sizing here. I was considering a 4-bet, which I think is very plausible, but being that the button ended up doing it for us, just played it safe with a call, and I don't mind going 3 ways to a flop here, but we don't have to. We go heads up to a flop. 5, ace, deuce. We flop a set. So here I decide to bet out of position 135 into a pot of 186. So 70% pot size bet here. I could see a check making more sense, but also think this play is fine. I wanted to make the bet look like protection or a bit bluffy. And I basically know an ace is going to call here, or a good pocket pair isn't going to fold to a single bet. But my opponent thinks about it for a while, and he like gestures as if he's going to put it all in. And I'm pretty much ready to snap him off. So I think he just picked up on that. He ends up surprisingly folding, makes a great fold. Good on you, bud. We still take down a nice profit of $111, so not mad at it. I'm in the small blind here with ace 4 of hearts, and it makes its way around to the button. And by the time it gets to the button, I think to myself, well, I'm going to go big here from the small blind, the worst position possible. But my opponent on the button actually open raises to $20, which is a little bit bigger than what's been typical. So I just repop to $80. The idea is let's go ahead and isolate here. Let's get everybody else to fold. Any of these limpers, we want to punish them. Anybody who even thought about getting into the pot, let's change their minds. And it works perfectly. The button thinks about it for a bit and ultimately makes the call. So kind of putting them on maybe jacks, tens, anything below that, middling pocket pairs, maybe a suited ace, but less likely since I have one, but it's possible. The flop comes out, it's ace, king, deuce, and I hit top pair, just a terrible kicker. I put out a bet of $60 into 168. It's really for information. I know that I'm getting called by any other aces, potentially a king, a flush draw. Any other pocket pair just hates this flop, and as we can see, my opponent thinks for a second and ultimately folds the sevens. So max value achieved. Few things are better than looking down at aces on the button. I open to $15 and only get one caller here from the big blind. So we're going heads up to a flop, king 7 4. He checks over to me, and I just want calls from anything at this point, so I'm going for value in position. Put out a nice bet of $20. Our opponent technically has the nut advantage, being he's in the big blind, so he could have those like kind of weird two pairs and whatnot, but he's pretty capped. Turn is the two of clubs. I recognize that there is a flush draw out there now, so I size up a little bit, $60 on the turn bet into 75. I don't mind this sizing because it gives us a lot of information if our opponent calls. He either has two pair, top pair, maybe a flush draw. River doesn't change much. It goes check, check. It's doubtful I miss value in this specific spot, but generally I want to go for as much value as possible. So a bet on the river, 25, 30% a pot, should be automatic because you're likely going to get called by a king or even ace high sometimes. And we're back. I'm in the small blind here and look down at pocket tens. There is a button straddle on, so that means I'm first to act. I open to $15 and the action folds all the way around to the hijack, who does think for a little bit before ultimately putting in a 3-bet to $50. Now, this particular opponent, a 3-bet to $50 is on the smaller side for him. So I go ahead and just make the call. I don't really like a 4-bet. I want to get to a flop and kind of go from there, which we end up going heads up to a flop. It's 7 queen deuce. I mix in a check here because his range, he's more likely to have the queen. He checks back, so I'm feeling good. The 2 of hearts on the turn, inconsequential. I think let's go ahead and start building this pot. Throw in a $50 bet, to which he calls pretty much immediately. The river, 3 of hearts. Again, not too concerned with a backdoor flush getting there. I think to myself, what's the most I can bet that a worse hand will call? I land on $100, but there's absolutely a case to be made for like a 250, 300, like way over bet. But after some time, my opponent does end up sticking in the call with ace high. So we get paid from ace high here. I like how this all panned out. Now, from my opponent's perspective, the check, bet, bet out of position line does look fishy, does look bluffy. But if we reconsider the preflop action, I called his 3-bet from the small blind. So I'm more likely to have something, right? Him being the 3-better from the hijack, he's more likely to have exactly what he had, like an ace king, an ace jack, an ace queen, something like that. Maybe jacks, maybe queens, but we get paid here, and I love it. There's an open from the under the gun +1 to $15. I'm in the cutoff and make the call with king 8 of clubs. The small blind comes along for the $15 as well. So we are going 3 ways to a flop. King, deuce, jack. We have top pair here. It checks over to me, and I'm putting out a little information bet here, $20, knowing that I'm going to get calls from draws, kings, middle pairs, floating aces, whatever. We end up getting calls from both of our opponents. As we go to the turn is a 5 of spades. Now, the small blind first act donks into 2 opponents for $30. This type of player, this player type, definitely gives me the most difficulty when they're just donking into people. I usually give them too much credit. It's a leak that I'm working on, but really all they're doing when they do this is they're going for pot control. So I didn't do it just yet, but I really would like to start raising in these types of spots against these player types. I end up calling here, and we river trips. So now we have a really good hand. Our opponent donks yet again for $50, and I do raise here. I don't really like the sizing of $150. I'd much rather go like 250, 300 to make it look very bluffy. 150 is just too easy of a fold from my opponent's point of view. So he pretty much knows I have a king at this point. Now, obviously this sizing is perfect for getting folds, but we're trying to get as much money as possible. So I likely miss value here. I'm in the cutoff, and the hijack opens to $12. I'm 3-betting for isolation. 245. However, the play does not work this time. We end up getting 3 callers. So unfortunately, we're going to go 4 ways to a flop. This is a lot of information, and my offsuit ace queen is pretty marginal in this spot, especially when we get a flop of 8-4-8 2 spades. I decide to c-bet here, $75 into 182. I don't really like this bet, especially without a spade in my hand. But I was trying to maximize fold equity, get people out of the hand. It's good for pot control, and we get good info. If anybody calls here, they are likely nutted or on a flush draw. And I do get a caller, and it kind of sets off some spidey sense for me. I'm already cautious, but now I get a call from this guy. So obviously he has something going on. The Jack of Spades, actually a good card for me because I can kind of just shut it down if my opponent ends up betting into me on the turn, but he does not. I check back. The river, 7 of diamonds. My opponent checks to me yet again. I know in order to have any chance at all at winning this pot, I must bet. So I go 125 into 332. Not the best bet sizing. I prefer 75 to 100. But my opponent hasn't done any betting, has shown no sign of strength. He thinks about it for a second or two and ultimately rips it. And it's an easy fold for me. A jam here is nothing but the nuts. Okay, here's a fun one. There's a button straddle, and I am in middle position here as a result. The opponent to my right opens to $15, and I'm mixing it up a bit here with the 7-8 offsuit. I call for 15, but then the cutoff, he raises. He 3-bets to $60, and the button calls. The under the gun player to my right also makes the call. So now I have to put in $45 to win 184. So it seems obvious to me that I'm going to at least see a flop here. I flop top pair. My opponent checks to me, and I recognize this as an opportunity. I don't see this flop hitting the cutoff and buttons range, and lead for 75 into 244, which is 30% pot. I like this sizing for what I'm looking to accomplish, and I'm really only concerned with the cutoff, who ends up folding. So the cutoff folds, the button folds, and I get a call from the under the gun. The 6 of spades on the turn is a good card for me. I end up making my straight, but something strange happens. My opponent leads for $350 from his $800 stack into $400. And here's what I think separates players. I recognize this as a big pressure spot. So I jam here, and this is why. I don't think a turn flush is betting pot out of position in this spot. What's more likely is that they would set up maybe a half pot bet here and then jam on the river. Another thing is that my opponent is actually quite stuck on the night. And this isn't a jab at my opponent, but some stuck players will act from a place of fear, and that just means that they're more likely to fold. So if he also has a straight here, this all in over the top bet in position is just going to force him off a chop, which is really all I'm trying to do here. He does have 7-7, which blocks the straight. So from my opponent's point of view, I likely do not have a 7. So if I likely do not have a 7 here, you likely are only going to get called by better when we consider this board texture. I suppose a set is possible here for me to have, though a set facing this turn bet on this board is also going to fold to an out of position pot size turn bet. So I will say that I did initially feel the pressure from his bet on the turn, just not enough, and I had a lane to flip that pressure, and that's what poker is all about. Poker is pressure, and we end up forcing him off the chop here for a nice profit. There you have it, folks. I am up on the night and couldn't be happier with my play. A couple of less notable hands after the fact, but we wrap up the night in a solid uppies position. Just want to thank you for supporting. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.